I'll take the house, the savings, and the pension. You can just go into a facility. Understood. These were the final words from my husband of 35 years on the last day of our marriage. Instead of appreciating my worn-out body after years of raising children, taking care of parents, and working tirelessly, my husband left me in a miserable state at the end. I wonder what the past 35 years were all for. He shoved everything onto me while he went out to drink. He took for granted everything I did, never once offering a word of thanks. I can't believe I put up with it all for 35 years. I have to admit, I'm pretty impressed with myself. But from now on, I'm going to live my life. It's time for him to feel the misery, I decided. My name is Susan Anderson, I'm 60 years old. I work part-time at a food company's factory. My husband's name is Larry Anderson, he's 65 years old. We met through an introduction by an acquaintance. I was 25 when we married. This year marked our 35th anniversary. We began our relationship encouraged by friends to start dating after several group outings, which were trendy back then. After meeting several times, we came to think that if we were going to marry, it would be with each other. Marrying just seemed like the natural next step. Once we started living together, it turned out that Larry had no savings. In the beginning, we lived together in a small apartment. I mainly covered the living expenses. Larry's salary was low, and feeling anxious about the future, I didn't quit my job and continued working. That meant there were times when I couldn't do household chores because of overtime work. You're late. I'm starving here. Were you waiting? You could have eaten first. What are you talking about? There's nothing to eat. How am I supposed to eat? Larry rarely had to work late and usually came home earlier than I did, but he never did any housework. Housework is the woman's job, right? Oh, come on. That's not the era we live in anymore. That was the time when women were starting to be more active in society. I often saw the term career woman on talk shows, but Larry always said that household chores were women's work. I would have preferred to be a full-time housewife, but financially, that was difficult. A modern woman had to balance both work and home life. Larry had a way of interpreting things conveniently for himself, quite unlike the traditional authoritative husband. Instead of me having the freedom, it was Larry who often went out drinking. If you're going to be late, at least let me know. Cut it out. It's my time, I can do what I want with it. His tone became even harsher when he came home drunk. While I couldn't freely use my own time and money, Larry was enjoying his. I feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick. I was so frustrated that within the first year of marriage, the thought of divorce crossed my mind. When I talked to my mother about it, she strictly opposed it, saying divorce was out of the question. I didn't have the courage to divorce either, worried about what other people would think. Living together meant making an effort to accept both the good and the bad, I kept telling myself. Then Larry, as soon as he got his paycheck, would go out drinking and was just spinning his wheels at work. He never did any overtime, let alone a side gig, even if he had the time. He just kept on going out for drinks or heading straight home after work. And when he came home to find me not there, he'd say, "I hate it when I come home and my wife isn't there. It stresses me out to see the lights off through the window. But sometimes I have to work late. What's the point of a woman working overtime? Change your job." Larry went behind my back and called my employer to get me fired. My boss, not wanting to get dragged into anything weird, or maybe he wanted me gone from the start, it's unclear, encouraged me to resign. It became awkward to stay at the company, so I quit. It was such a struggle to get that job in the first place, and now I had to start looking for work again. By this point, having resigned from 2 companies, I wasn't even getting past the application screenings. Larry, seeing me flustered, said, "Part-time's fine, isn't it? I'm full-time after all." I was never the career woman type, so I didn't linger on the past, but I did worry if his salary alone was enough. So I took on 2 part-time jobs. I was a morning cleaner and a cashier at a grocery store. On days I knew Larry would be home late, I worked overtime at the store. When Larry was home, I'd be there. When he wasn't, I worked hard. Years went by living like this. I could endure it because I thought he needed me. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he wanted me to be home when he got back. A year after we got married, I gave birth to our eldest son. This apartment is too cramped. Yeah. When the kid gets to elementary school age, he'll want his own room, and he might even want siblings. Around that time, Larry's mom suggested moving in together. Larry's mother was a divorced single mother. She must have felt lonely after her only child, Larry, got married and left the house. It'll be killing 2 birds with 1 stone, won't it? We won't have to pay rent. I'm sure that's what his mother had told him. I wanted some time to think. Mom's already started getting things ready, you know? I was shocked to find out they'd already prepared a room for my son, changing the wallpaper and all. I had wanted to keep my part-time jobs. So I agreed without giving it much thought. But I was too naive. My mother-in-law made me the target of her daily snide remarks. It's a shame for a child to have a mother working so hard. In my day, that was unthinkable. She had never worked. After her divorce, she relied on her parents' help to raise Larry. Her parents had some wealth, so money wasn't an issue. Now she lives off a modest pension and her parents' inheritance. Although she seemed to be a bit of a spendthrift. She'd spend money on her hobbies and on Larry and his son, but she never extended that generosity to me. Meals were prepared for everyone but me, and no matter where they went, I was always left behind. I am grateful that she took care of my grandchild. And since she cooked for Larry, I didn't need to be home when he returned. You can work full-time now. Overtime's okay, too. What? Why all of a sudden? Since Mom's here, you can go work. I realized how selfish it was. In the end, when he said he wanted someone at home, it wasn't about wanting me there, but about having someone take care of things for him. I started working as a temp after dropping my son off at daycare. Luckily, my mother-in-law was happy to pick him up, so I could rely on her to get him home. It was a relief not to get complaints even when the overtime kept up. After about 10 years of this, my mother-in-law started acting strangely. Who are you? A burglar, I know it. Larry, call the police. It's me, Susan. She had developed Alzheimer's disease. She completely saw me as the enemy. She often didn't recognize Larry or her grandson. One day, after wandering off, she had an accident and ended up bedridden. It's your fault Mom got like this. You take responsibility and look after her. How is it my fault? It's because you work late into the night. But you were the one who said it was okay for me to work. We couldn't stop fighting. I thought about taking my son and leaving, but I couldn't abandon my mother-in-law, so I decided to endure it. Besides, my son liked both Larry and his grandmother. I couldn't talk to him about it. My mother-in-law, who never accepted me as family, complained daily while I took care of her. Even when I consulted Larry about it, he brushed it off in one sentence. It can't be helped, she has dementia. I quit my job and became increasingly isolated. My mother-in-law, who seemed to enjoy mistreating her daughters-in-law, didn't become kinder to me, whom she saw as a stranger, with dementia. I had hoped, but it was a pipe dream. She must have always disliked me from the start. But to my son, she was still his dear grandma. I continued to care for my mother-in-law alone until she passed away. After she died and my son became independent, only Larry and I were left in the house. Next year, Larry is set to retire. I was looking forward to traveling and going out with just the 2 of us. But then Larry hit me with something unbelievable. It's written out for me. Just sign it and submit it yourself. A divorce paper? You can tell by looking at it. You're really slow, you know. That's what was so annoying about you. I felt like I had been struck on the back of my head. I felt like I was going to collapse. Why? Did I do something to deserve a divorce? Well, if I had to say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. What do you mean? Larry looked at me and smirked. I've got someone I want to marry. Turns out, Larry had a mistress. And it seemed like their affair had been going on for years. She was 20 years younger than me. So, you were cheating on me while I was taking care of your mother and raising our child? It seems that way. I was about to explode with anger at Larry's indifferent answer. While I was enduring my mother-in-law's verbal abuse, raising a child and dealing with loneliness, sacrificing what I wanted to do and working hard all by myself, Larry was fooling around with his mistress. I wish I didn't know that. You've been deceiving me all this time. I'll never forgive you. What are you gonna do about it? You can't do anything anyway. Larry scoffed at me with contempt. So, you're going to divorce me and be with that woman? That's right. She's much younger and better than you. I understand. Then I'll sign the divorce papers. But just so you know, I'll be asking both of you for alimony. Fine by me, I'll pay whatever. I have my mom's inheritance. Oh, but I'm not splitting the assets, just so you know. I thought it over for a moment. I had some savings of my own. I didn't want Larry or his mistress to get their hands on it. All right. Alimony will do. But let's make it clear, my assets are off the table. Then Larry burst out laughing. Your money is peanuts. I don't need that. With a lawyer present, we signed the papers agreeing not to divide the property and we got divorced. I received $60,000 in alimony. It seemed to be paid in a lump sum from my mother-in-law's inheritance. He probably wanted to start a new life with his mistress as soon as possible. To sever ties with me, he settled the hassle with money. After the lawyer left, Larry said to me, I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement pay. You should just go to some facility. Then I really did check into the facility. It wasn't because Larry told me to. I thought it would make my golden years more enjoyable. The house was originally Larry's family home, and I had nowhere else to live. My sister and her husband were living in my family home, and I didn't want to impose on my son and his wife. I knew Larry had no savings, so splitting any assets would have been pointless. More than that, I wanted to get the divorce over with, and I was confident I could make it on my own from here on out. The inheritance from Larry's mother went to him, and I was content with just the alimony. Months later, one day, Larry showed up at the facility. I hadn't told him my current address. He shouldn't have known I was at the facility. He must have used some professional agency to find out, I guess. What could he possibly want so badly that he had to go through all that trouble? There are other residents in the facility. I had him wait outside on the terrace. When I saw Larry sitting on the terrace from a distance, looking around helplessly, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. What on earth did I ever see in this man to marry him? It's a mystery to me. Sorry to keep you waiting. What do you want? What's this all about? Larry confronted me, not even bothering with a greeting. I knew what had surprised him, but I played dumb. Why did you come all of a sudden? How did you find this place? You were impossible to get in touch with. It took me a long time to find out. You didn't tell our son either, did you? He didn't know anything. Well, he has his own family now. It'd be wrong to bother them. Besides, you haven't answered my question. How did you find out about this place? I asked a private detective. They found out for me when I said I needed to contact you about the alimony. An ex-husband can be quite useful, huh? I figured as much that he used a professional. Really, which detective agency was it? I felt angry about the privacy intrusion, but I kept my cool. Anyway, why on earth can someone like you afford to live in such a fancy place? That was the reason for Larry's surprise. After our divorce, I found this upscale facility I had wanted to enter with Larry for our retirement and moved in alone. This upscale facility I'm living in isn't your typical nursing home. It's more like a luxury condo with a hospital attached. There's even a dining hall with meals prepared by a nutritionist, and during the day, I have a great time with the other residents and the helpers. Of course, I can be alone if I want, and once a day, someone comes by to check if I haven't fallen or anything. There's even an emergency button in my room for when something happens. This place costs like $2 million, right? How do you have that kind of money? Actually, I've been investing for our retirement since we got married, for about 35 years. I lost my job in the 1991, which drained my savings and left me panicked. Life is unpredictable. I realized saving money wasn't enough, so I started learning about investing. I didn't want to seem greedy, so I never told Larry, who I was dating at the time. At first, I invested a little at a time. After getting married, wanting to enjoy delicious food and travel with Larry in our retirement, I began investing more seriously. Since we both worked, I used a bit of my own money to invest. I sacrificed outings with friends, fine dining, shopping, and travel. All the money I could spend freely went into investments. After 35 years of diligent investing, I was able to amass a great fortune. When I told Larry about it, he said this: "Then that money is partly mine too." I knew he would say something like that. "Sorry, but I can't give you any of my money." "Why not? I'm your ex-husband, it should be part of my assets too." "You gave up that claim yourself, right in front of the lawyer. Have you forgotten?" "Damn! That's why you wanted a lawyer. You tricked me." Who has been deceiving whom all this time, I wonder? Larry looked frustrated, his face twisting in disappointment. Feeling like it was a waste of time to continue this conversation, I urged Larry to leave. "No way! I'm not leaving. I'm going to live here too." I was so astonished that I was at a loss for words. After a while, a security guard from the facility arrived, and I had them take Larry away. It seems that one of the residents, noticing my distress, had called the security guard. Despite his repeated attempts to visit me, Larry's nuisance behavior eventually got him banned from the facility. He was put on the blacklist. Nevertheless, I was curious about why he was so desperate to see me, so I contacted my son. According to my son, Larry apparently has debts. After our divorce, Larry planned to marry his mistress. But when the mistress found out he had paid alimony to me, she was furious. To win back her affection, Larry spent a lot of money on her. Even so, she didn't marry him but continued to take his money until she switched to a younger man. "Are you dumping me? After everything I've given you?" It was too late for regrets. The mistress dumped Larry without a second thought. She had lost interest in a penniless Larry. In the end, Larry was just a convenient source of funds for her. It was probably the younger man who was her real target all along. I couldn't imagine a woman 20 years his junior seriously planning to marry someone like Larry. Larry alone believed in the marriage with his mistress, which must have been a big shock to him. In the end, Larry, who had squandered his parents' inheritance and was in debt, was left alone with only the house. That house is over 70 years old. It's falling apart everywhere, but he has no money to repair it. He's still living there alone in the rundown house. My son expressed no intention of offering a helping hand. Recently, a city official told him to at least repair the exterior because it was causing trouble for the neighboring houses. Larry lost it and caused such a scene that the police got involved. My son went to pick up his father at the police station but told him it was the end of their relationship. "You're abandoning me too?" Larry said that, while crying and begging, his son had shrugged him off. Feeling abandoned by his son, I thought him a miserable man. Due to an incident involving the police at his house, he became the subject of scorn in the neighborhood, and it seems he now spends his weekends cooped up at home. After finishing updating me on Larry's situation, my son asked that I give him a call sometime, showing he still cared in his own way, which made me happy. Sometime after the call with his son, Larry himself called me. When I ignored that too, he called the facility directly. Such tenacity. The staff at the facility were concerned too. I decided to answer the phone just once. I just need to borrow a little money. No, I'm sorry. Don't you have a pension coming? Larry was supposed to have recently retired. So I thought it was a lie that he didn't have any money. I won't receive any of that. Don't lie to me. You got your pension, didn't you? It was discovered at the last minute that I had an affair, and I was fired. Incredibly, Larry had been let go just before his retirement. It seems the affair was with a coworker, and after breaking up with Larry, she became frightened by his stalker-like behavior and reported it to the company. Ultimately, the affair was discovered by the company, and he was fired without his pension. His stalking and the incident with the police were discovered too, which probably contributed to the problem. I felt no sympathy whatsoever after hearing this story. After that, I asked the facility staff to contact the police the next time he called. Giving up on getting through to me by phone, Larry then started sending letters. They started with, "I want to see you again," and "I'm lonely." But by the end, they changed to, "I need to borrow money." I think he's in dire straits. I couldn't help but laugh once. I forget which letter it was, but the ink was blurred on one. It looked like it was from tears, but I'm sure it was just water. I'm amazed at such theatrics, wondering what the point is. It really is a hard-knock life. After a year of no replies from me, the letters finally stopped. Then, several years passed. I had completely forgotten about Larry. One day, while I was out shopping, a dirty, smelly man approached me. He was thin, with an unkempt beard almost entirely gray. It was undoubtedly Larry. "Susan, isn't it?" I was shocked by how different he looked. "I've finally found you. Let's start over. You're all I have." As he said this and grabbed my shoulder, I felt fear. "It's me, Larry. You know that, right?" "I know who you are. But I'm a stranger to you now. Goodbye." As I tried to leave, Larry stepped in front of me, blocking my way. He looked at me with begging eyes. "Please, come back home. I can't stand being alone in my old age." "You were the one who threw me out, remember?" "That's why I'm apologizing." "An apology won't fix what you did. Plus, I've moved on. You should too." I tried to ignore Larry and leave, but he kept chasing after me, bowing his head again and again. "We're divorced, Larry. Get over it." "I was wrong. You were the most important thing to me. I've finally realized that." "It's too late for that now." As I tried to put distance between us, Larry grabbed my arm. That's when someone said, "Could you let go of her arm, please?" "Who are you?" "This is my husband." "What?" "You see, I remarried. His name is Mark. He's 2 years older than me. We got close at the same care facility. When Larry came to the facility, it was Mark who called security for me. I heard about it from the other residents. I was drawn to his thoughtfulness and kindness. Mark also enjoyed my company, and naturally, we started spending more time together. And so we decided to get married. I did wonder if remarrying at this age was wise, but then I thought, why not be happy in the end? So, we went for it. Mark is the one who freed me from Larry." "You mean you got remarried?" "That's right. So please stop concerning yourself with me." "Oh no." Larry was clearly shaken. I was anxious he might do something to Mark out of anger, but Larry just didn't have it in him anymore. Instead, he just collapsed there and cried. "Come on. Stop it, it's embarrassing." "Shut up." leave me alone." Larry was crying unabashedly. Everyone was watching from a distance. I thought he looked utterly pitiful. A grown man crying in the street. Can someone really do this so easily, or am I being tested? "Let's go, Susan." "All right." Urged by Mark, I left the scene. Since then, Larry hasn't shown his face to me. According to my son, Larry still lives in that rundown house without making any repairs. He can't manage household chores, doesn't take out the trash, and has been reported several times for the stench. My son gets the calls, and it bothers him. No matter what is said, it's no good, and my son finally lost his temper. In front of the social worker, Larry claimed that he wasn't his son. After that, Larry would get angry if my son tried to contact him, so the calls stopped. It seems like the authorities have given up as well, saying it's useless. He's truly a neighborhood nuisance. But it's no longer my concern. In the end, Larry has been abandoned by everyone and is living in isolation. "I should have never taken a mistress," he said once, as my son told me. But for me, it's not about the mistress. It's the culmination of a life lived selfishly without a thought for others. He's reaping what he sowed. Humans might be creatures that regret their actions, but to continue without reflection for over 70 years is just painful. And Larry will likely never realize this. He has destroyed his own future. It's his job to repair it. He might not have the strength to do it himself, but he has to try. I hope Larry faces what he's done and lives the rest of his life in a way that's true to him. I'm grateful to Larry now. If I had kept expecting something from him, my life would have been ruined. Thanks to the divorce he initiated because of his affair, I can live my own life. I now keep in touch with my son more often. It all changed when my daughter-in-law told me not to worry about it. That's when I realized I had lived a life too considerate of others. I kept my distance from my adult son, thinking I'd bother him. When my son told me he hated his grandmother and father since he was a child, I was shocked. He knew all along about my mother's mistreatment and his father's affairs. I've decided to live the rest of my life without such concerns. Now my son, his wife, and grandchildren come to visit. I plan to catch up on the conversations I couldn't have with my son before. My son seems a bit shy, but it's funny how he can talk naturally when the grandkids and daughter-in-law are around. Mark has been accepted by my son, and my grandkids adore him as if he were their real grandfather. We're enjoying our time together at the facility now. We have many friends there and are happy. We want to stay healthy and live long lives.